Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilter 7 in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 127, is Upsizing Your Quilt Pattern. Stay tuned for the winner of the scrap box giveaway and the announcement of this week's giveaway. Before we get to the upsizing, let me give you my opinion. I am showing you this quilt from a customer with her permission. It is an entirely scrap quilt. This customer does so many scrap quilts. This is pretty much her style, but this to me is one of the best. This whole top was all from what she had. And it may be a little difficult to see on camera, but all these white on whites are different white on whites. And what I find particularly the feature that makes this work is the color scheme. All the houses are mostly red. All the roofs are mostly black. The trees are obviously green, and the doors and windows are yellow gold. So while they're all different fabrics, they're all each position is the same color. And I just really think this works just fabulously. And if you have a whole lot of scraps, this type of a quilt could work really good for you. In addition, with extra pieces that she had left over from cutting these out, she made a whole border of just small squares. The last thing about this quilt I'd like to talk about is the border. I quilt a lot of her quilts, so I know what goes on the backs of her quilts. This was a back from a different quilt. And what happens when you have a quilt top that's bigger than 40, where you can use just one width of fabric, and a lot smaller than 80, which would be two widths of fabric, you have a whole lot of extra fabric. So what has already been cut off of this, her seam is way down here. So she has a full, 40 inches from here. That then can make another border. The other thing people do with the excess of the backs is make a binding. So if you are purchasing fabric for a back and intending to use it also for the binding, don't buy the full amount for the back and a full amount for the binding without making sure that you may not need the binding fabric, because you may have plenty from the rest of the back to use for the binding. So keep that in mind as you're figuring out how much fabric you need. But I just think this is such a great example of one of the best scrap quilts I've ever seen. Now, let's get to upsizing your quilt block. I recently got this pattern of Elizabeth Hartman's, her Happy Halloween pattern. And while I love all of her individual blocks in here, as you know from my Scarecrow and my Witch, I don't want a giant Halloween quilt. I like little wall quilts or door banners, and I decided I wanted to put the ghost on my back door. And here is the ghost that I made, and I upsized it because in the pattern, the block is 9 by 10.5. That's just too small to hang on my back door. And while it would be easier to just double the size of the block, the math would be way easier, that would then get it to 18 by 21. That's too big if I want to add a border. So I decided to increase it by a half, by 50%, and make my block 13.5 by 15.75. Now, for all my viewers who get heart palpitations when I start doing math on the whiteboard, just take a deep breath. You can use your phone calculator or get out an actual calculator, a pen and a paper, and it's easy. This is my actual piece of paper that I did the math for my ghost on. I went through each piece and figured out what I had to cut the pieces at to make the size I wanted to make. So I'm just going to give you two examples here. One is a simple one most of us can do in our head. And then the second one is the one where I always use the calculator. So the first piece that I want to show you is the easy one. It's cut an inch square. So what does that mean? That means it finishes to a 1/2 inch square. And before I go on, if this is your first time viewing, the math for quilters is always do the math without the seam allowance and then add the seam allowance back in at the end. So that's why I first had to take what it was cut at and make it into without the seam allowance. Now I do the math. So I want to make this 50% bigger. So that means 1/2 of a 1/2 is a 1/4. So a 1/2 plus a 1/4 equals 3/4. If you were going to do this on the calculator, you would say a 1/2, which is 0.5, times 1.5 equals 0.75. And 0.75 is 3/4. So now I have to add the seam allowance back in, which is a 1/2. So I add a 1/2. So now I have to cut my square 1 1/4. That one's easy. This next one I'm showing you was 3 1/4 by 7 1/2. So that means without the seam allowance, it's 2 3/4 by 7. So now I have to take my 2 3/4, which is 2.75, to punch into your calculator, times 1.5 equals 4.125. 0.125 is an eighth. So that means 4 1/8 for the what was the 2 3/4, and for the 7, it's 7 times 1.5 equals 10.5, which is 10 1/2. So now I add the 1/2 inch back in. So now it's 4 5/8 by 11. Now, for this to work, you need to know your decimals. So I just wrote it out on a whiteboard. You can take a screenshot of this and print it out for yourself for reference, or I'm sure you can find it on the internet. But I'm going to switch out this board and put the other board up just so you can see. These are your decimals. And actually, this is just all the eighths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. Why are the thirds not there? Because there's no third lines on your ruler. If you're coming up with thirds, in order to cut your pieces, we need to make some adjustments to the numbers. So for putting numbers into your calculator and looking at your calculator and seeing what the number that comes out to know what you want to cut, this is what you need to know. 0.125 is an eighth, 0.25 is the 1/4, and so on down the line. I hope this helps you. Like I said, if you don't have the picture of this in your phone or something, I'm sure you can find it on the internet. But that's the math is easy. Don't, because it's math, get too excited that you can't do it, because you really can. And cutting at eighths isn't my favorite thing to do. But what I said when I started was I didn't want to do the easy math. It would have been too big. So I opted for the harder math, harder cutting, by a little bit, not bad. All the rulers have the 1/8" marks on them to get the size I wanted. So here is my ghost, and one of my customers said it looked like Pac-Man, and I have to agree that it kind of does. So I think I'm going to embroider Boo up here and hang it on my back door. Now the block in the pattern has the side borders on it, but it stops here and here for the measurements. So to make mine balanced, as instead of as part of a bigger quilt, it being its own mini quilt, I added an equal border top and bottom, and then I did the little orange border and the outer border of spider webs and spiders. So I like it. I'm happy. And actually now I want to make the bat and the pumpkin and the spiders and the candy from Elizabeth Hartman's pattern. Will it get done for this Halloween? Probably not, but I'll try. Okay, that is the episode. Let's get to the winner of the giveaway. And remember, the giveaway is the scrap box. It's all the leftovers from that braid quilt that the customer gave me. And then whatever is left in the flat rate box, I'm just going to fill it with scraps that I think you would like. And the winner of the scrap box is Susan Bible 8696. Please email me your address to quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com and I will get it out to you. This week's giveaway is a little bit different than I normally do. This is a scrap hunter's star, and it's a little wild. It's small, it's 36 across, it's octagonal, and I have to say when I first made it, I kind of thought it was too wild, but it really grew on me. I do like it. Like I said, it's wild, but I have so many quilt tops to quilt that even though I like it, I'm just never going to get to it. So I hope somebody out there wants it, that you could use it as a table topper, or you can. One idea I had was put, triangles on here. If you put a triangle on here, you could get it to be a square, and it could be a small quilt, or it could be the center of a back, or, you're all as creative as I am. So whatever you decide to do with it, I just hope somebody gets it that wants it and loves it. So if you'd like to enter, you need to like, subscribe, comment, and in the comment, put Hunter's Star, and we will announce the winner next week. So I want to thank you all for watching. I've seen in the comments I have a whole lot of new viewers. So thank you to all who watch. And until next time, happy sewing.